The owner of the bushy mustache under his nose persistently offered an excellent cultivation book. Showing one of the pictures, he made it clear that spiritual beasts from another world would be encountered in the book. The next picture was of a girl in an ancient costume. Turning the page, the man proudly poked his finger at the image of a girl in fancy garb, and spoke of the presence of beast girls in the book. What kind of beastie girls are there, though? The man assured me there was a whole bestiary of beauties. The young man confusedly said that he didn't need all this, he was only looking for a manual on drawing people and animals. The salesman cheerfully told him that this book had a great story and lively emotions, and that such books were rare nowadays. He added that everyone who took the book to read was invariably very satisfied. The young man pretended he was completely uninterested in the whole thing and snickered, interjecting about the collection of beast girls. Finding the product on the website, he gave the review a 10 out of a possible 10. The seller was very excited and said it was a book with pictures of people and animals. He added that the author had just left, but that he could give it to him as well, and slipped the book into the boy's bag. The young man came home and slammed the door, holding the book in his hands. He couldn't wait to open it. The young man's name is Lin Xin. Today is a special day, he's turning 18, and so it is today that Lin wants to do something special, something important in his life. He tuned up and placed the book he had just received with the rib on the table. The young man wondered on which page the book would open. But contrary to expectations, the book didn't open at all, as if the whole thing was solid or glued together. Lin tried to open the book by force, and then something happened. The drawing on the cover of the book lit up with a bright yellow glow, and bright rays of light burst out from the book itself, illuminating the entire room with a glow. Suddenly, the book opened and Lin heard languorous voices broadcasting that after 1300 years, his faithful slave girls had finally waited for their master. Many graceful beauties appeared on the spread of the book, all of them hopelessly in love with the same man they called the emperor. Lin rejoiced at such an amazing picture book. He came to be completely delighted. Suddenly, the pages began to change their shape and yellow bubbles appeared in them, which turned into the likeness of golden-colored human hands. A multitude of hands reached for Lin, grabbing him. They tried to pull him into their book. The young man resented it and rested his hands on the table. But the forces were clearly unequal, and Lin was sucked into the book. Only his legs from waist to toe remained above the table, and they continued to plunge rapidly into the unknown. Lin flew through the yellow portal straight into the unknown and shouted along the way that it wasn't his fault in any way, and he had just bought a book to look at girls. A forest edge, on it stands a stone of a bizarre shape with sharp edges. There is a lot of blood on the stone itself. Frogs are croaking all around. A little awake, Lin opened his eyes. Under his eye, he could see very fresh bruises and abrasions. Sitting on the ground, Lin began to turn his head in all directions and couldn't understand where he was. It looked like he had entered a different world and bumped his head on that rock. There was a small river nearby. Someone had placed 3 flat stones for crossing from bank to bank. Lin grabbed his head. It ached terribly. He went to the river to wash his face. After washing off the blood and gazing at his image, Lin suddenly realized that it wasn't his body at all and assumed that he had been reborn. Some unknown images flashed through his mind, and the young man realized that he still had the memories of the original owner of this body. Starting to put his memories in order, Lin realized that in this world, people used spirit beasts to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to cultivate. But the owner of the body, Lin Xing, couldn't afford to buy a spirit beast to cultivate. The young man was amazed that their names were completely the same. The former owner of this body was so poor that he used to steal food every day by climbing the wall and sneaking into other people's houses. He thought sadly of the fact that it would take him a full 20 years to afford any spiritual beast. A few minutes ago, Lin Xian bumped into the son of the town governor. After overhearing his conversation, he found out that he wanted to drug his classmate. After noticing the intruder, the town governor's son organized a chase and ordered his men to arrest Lin Xing. Lin managed to escape from them and hide on the outskirts of the city. Unfortunately, he slipped while crossing the crossing and hit his head on a rock. That's how he died. Lin sat in the lotus posture and contemplated the fact that life was painful, and it was generally surprising that the previous body master had even lived to his years. Suddenly, a voice came from the book that brought Lin Xian to this world. He said that this was all very sad. He noticed that the young people were similar not only in names but also in appearance. The voice added that based on that data, being reborn into that person's body would have the least effect on Lin. Lin got angry and asked the book the bestiary of beauties if he was in the book of horrors and if the voice had brought him to this place by kicking the book. Well, the book flew high into the air and the voice pitifully began to make excuses that he had no malicious intent. Voices came from behind. The young master's servants were rejoicing that they had found the fugitive. Lin thought that these guys were really persistent. He was afraid that this was the end. The book immediately flew up to him, and the voice assured him that there was no escape from those people and he had better make a pact with the book. He promised that Lin would be able to use the beast girl and kill the pursuers. Lin still hesitated for a while, but realized that his enemies were very close and soon their axes would start crumbling his bones. He quickly asked the book how he could make a pact. The cover illuminated a circle with the image of a 5-fingered hand, and the voice assured him that all he had to do was place his palm on the spot. The pursuers were already running up to Lin, and he realized that he simply had no choice. He quickly placed his palm at the designated spot on the cover of the book and felt the book vibrate. The voice solemnly announced that Lin Xian had made a pact with the immortal sacred body and the contract was signed. One of the pursuers shouted that they should chop him down, and they started throwing their axes at Lin. Lin couldn't understand why he had received the body of an immortal saint and what it meant. The voice cheerfully announced that the contract was done and now the first beast maiden could be drawn. Lin was out of breath and ordered him to draw faster. Suddenly, Lin found himself surrounded by flames on all sides. A voice congratulated him for obtaining an ancient spirit beast, the Fire Chaos Phoenix. Out of surprise, Lin let the book out of his hands. A girl of unprecedented beauty emerged from the flames. She called Lin as master. The voice clarified that this Phoenix of Fire Chaos had a name of its own. Her name is Ji Ku. She stepped out of the flames and Lin noticed the white shoes on the long-legged girl. The pursuers realized that this spirit beast had great potential and decided to capture it to give to their master. They were sure that the beast had recently been stolen and had not had time to be trained. The fire beast himself covered his eyes, adapting to his new surroundings. After complaining about a lot of noise, Ji rushed into the center of the enemies and simply scattered them in different directions. Lin sat back and watched the girl's actions. He saw that Ji had dealt with all of them in one blow and realized that she was unusually strong. One of the enemies managed to get up and ran wherever he was looking, crying out for help. Ji leaned over to Lin and said that she had finally waited for him. Lin himself was a little scared of his beast, stepped back and offered to finish off anyone chasing him first. Ji languidly said that they would talk about that a little later, and leaned even lower towards him. Lin was already lying on the ground, and there was nowhere else to go. Ji said she just wanted to ask her master to do something with her. She hinted that with the arrival of spring, the birds were actively breeding, and besides, her master didn't even realize how good-looking Ji was. Lin muttered that he could hardly help her with that. They were sitting on the lawn and Ji asked the master to cut to the chase. Lin started to refuse and demanded to stop undressing him. She gently put her arms around his neck and told him that he was the reincarnation of the demon emperor and Ji was his concubine. She said that the demon race was in danger and needed Lin to take charge of the situation. The young man asked her to stop and asked how he could be a demon lord while being an ordinary human. Ji explained that only the emperor could open the beast devil book, and the fact that he had opened the book was undeniable proof. Ji lay on the grass and took off her shoes, claiming that there could be no mistake. Or does Lin think that she is not worthy of the emperor's favor? Wisdom and lust were tearing his mind in two. Wisdom convinced Lin that he didn't need it at all, but desire took over and he proved to himself that it was a gift, so why not accept it? He should just keep going and everything would work out. Finally making up his mind, he jumped up and invited the girl to begin the lovemaking. Ji knocked him down and started hugging him passionately. Lin Yu liked it very much. But she was overly insistent, and the guy asked her to be a little more gentle. After a moment's hesitation, he told her that it was his first time. But no sooner had Lin finished his sentence than the book flew into the air and Ji was dragged there. A voice told the young man that now was not the time for that. Lin resented it and almost tore the book to pieces out of anger. He said that he had almost succeeded and the voice had ruined his fun. The voice asked him to let him go, because he had saved Lin's life. Lin began to poke his finger hard at the book and said that he would poke at the voice until it died. The voice was indignant and yelped in pain. He explained that the source of all power in this world is called energy. the human race uses spirit beasts to absorb the energy of heaven and earth and further transform it into true chi. An immortal body could absorb energy anywhere and anytime without needing beasts. You can also take turns transferring energy to the zoo girls through intercourse. The voice told Lin that he had just arrived in this world, so his reserves were almost at zero, and spirit beasts have a much higher energy demand than his current energy absorption rate, and with the energy exchange now, Lin would simply die from exhaustion. The young man finally began to understand what the voice was getting at. He realized that he had to store energy during the day and give it away at night. He was angry that he hadn't known this before, and angrily asked the voice why he hadn't told it right away. Lin started asking various questions non-stop, such as what the demon clan was and what the voice itself was. The voice asked him not to ask questions so quickly and promised to tell him something. The voice said that the demon emperor had passed away last winter. The races of humans and monsters raided the demon capital, and many demons were killed. To protect the demonic bloodline, the demon empress sealed the 15 strongest beast girls in the book's body. The voice was sent to Earth to open a portal between two dimensions. He was tasked with waiting for the reincarnated demon emperor to return. The voice added that Lin should breed with 15 beast maidens and revive the demon race. Xin was a little upset with his status. He was swayed by the fact that the demon emperor was being used as an ordinary male for mating. His voice tried to calm him down and assured him that all of these beast maidens had been carefully selected by the empress. He explained that each of them is a new experience. Among them are not only chickens, foxes and rabbits, but also tigers, bears, lizards. Lin immediately interrupted him and shouted that no one would ever get up on a lizard at all. He said that both humans and monsters consider demons to be the main problem, and once Lin shows them his face, they will surely hack him to death. The young man said that it was too dangerous for him and he refused. The book changed the color of the pages to yellow with a reddish tint, and the voice said it was too late to renege on the contract. The color of the pages turned scarlet, and the voice warned Lin that he should not refuse to cooperate, otherwise, it would simply let them eat Lin alive. The frightened young man asked the book if the voice was a devil in the flesh. Lin summarized the results. From the looks of it, he had to listen to the voice and follow its orders, or else Lin wouldn't be able to survive, and the beast maiden could easily finish him off. As he talked himself down, the young man said that Phoenix looked pretty good and would be much calmer with her. Lin was a little puzzled that he would have to work hard every night. A young man was walking through the meadow and asked why he couldn't feel anything even though he was absorbing energy all the time. The voice replied that Lin would understand everything by himself when he got into a fight. Lin perplexedly interrogated the voice. Before this he hadn't even thought about a possible fight. At that moment something lifted him into the air, and just in time, the sword flew at his feet and clattered into the wood. Lu Dejiao, the son of the town governor, smirked and asked Lin how it was that he could dodge his attacks and admitted that he had underestimated him. His companion called the young man a thief and demanded to show his beast to Mr. Lu. His own tiger was waiting right there. Lin was frightened. He wished Phoenix had killed them then. Now they were back with their master. Ji raised her voice from the book and shouted that if they so much as laid a finger on her master, she would incinerate them all. But the voice was of a different opinion. He said that Lin should fight this battle himself to feel his strength. Lin tried to protest. He honestly admitted that he had not won a single battle since childhood. Lu turned his tiger on the young man. His companions stood nearby and hooted that he was definitely lost now and that he didn't deserve such a spiritual beast. Lin dodged the tiger's jump and prepared for the spirit beast's next attack. He asked everyone to shut up and suggested that tiger try his fist to the touch. A girl in a pink dress was making her way through the thicket. She said she saw them just coming this way. There was some kind of creature sitting on her shoulder. She wondered where everyone had disappeared to. Lin looked in surprise at the stricken tiger, who was lying fainted under a fallen tree nearby, and thought that perhaps this was the force. A voice cheerfully confirmed his guess and said that it was the result of 1 hour of energy absorption. Suddenly, a snake came out of nowhere and tightly wrapped around his wrist, and Lin could barely move his fingers. While he was trying to figure out where the snake came from, the same snake wrapped around his other wrist. In the next moment, Lin realized that all 4 of his limbs were restrained. The snakes were being released by his foes, and the other end of the snakes were coiled around their own arms. This was a method he referred to as the restraining 4-star snake formation. Lu stood nearby with his tiger, who had already regained his senses, and asked mockingly who Lin thought he was. The tiger growled happily. Lu commanded the tiger to attack and rushed forward with it himself. At the same moment that tiger missed Lin's punch and flew flipping straight into the river, from the other bank, someone called out to Lu Didiao. Lu obsequiously asked the girl in the pink dress what she was doing here, since she couldn't know about his plans. Ching Miao Miao, the daughter of the head of the martial art hall, instead of answering, rebuked him for bullying his classmates again. The memories of the body master's past told Lin Xian that the person in front of him was Ching Miao Miao, Lu Dao Dao's classmate and the object of Lin Xian's past admiration. Hoping to escape, Lin thought that she had seen Lu and his men moving around, and therefore had followed him here. Meanwhile, Lu was making excuses to Cheng that he had done nothing of the sort, but it was hard for Cheng to be confused. She rebuked Lu for lying and said that she had seen it with her own eyes. She asked if Lu wanted Miao to tell his father about it. Lu immediately fell to his knees and shouted that he would not do it again. He knew that if his father found out, he would punish Lu very severely. At that time, Lin was suspended from a tree. He was struggling desperately in trying to free himself. Miao took a closer look at him and told Lu that the guy was not his classmate at all. Lu replied that the young man was just a mudblood and naturally they weren't classmates. He wished Cheng would get off his back as soon as possible. Miao asked why he was bullying Lin then. The young man was being stretched by his arms in different directions at this moment. Lin dared to raise his voice and shouted that Lu was simply not as good as him and was trying to hound the young man to maintain his authority. Lu knew that with Miao's help, he could easily enter the martial art hall if he performed well, and there he could learn new techniques of attack and self-defense, which would be useful to him many times. Lu got angry, asked for the insult to be repeated and said that it was all lies and he was much stronger than Lin. The tiger quickly intercepted his master's emotions and growled angrily at the young man as well. Together with Tiger, Lu threw himself at the young man, threatening to beat him to death. Ching tried to stop him, but Lu ignored her. He had only one thought in his mind. Lu thought that Lin had provoked him, so it was safe to kill him and nothing would happen. Tiger, on the other hand, thought that even an expert of the third heaven of the spiritual element realm wouldn't be able to easily break free from his father's 4-star serpent formation. Lin felt a tremendous amount of strength within himself and seemed to turn mentally to his opponent, asking him if he could resist. One of Lu's men felt that his snake ropes were strangely taut and something unusual was happening. The man standing in the other corner, holding his other hand, experienced the same thing. Lin controlled their same ropes, only now he was swinging the enemies around like fluff. Triumphant, he thought that from now on, he was starting his own journey in the world of immortals. Lu was amazed, never before had he seen such a trick in a man with such strength. Lu looked at his opponent, and his self-confidence was extinguishing with every passing second. Faithful Tiger also stopped growling and started making sounds that were like a puppy whimpering. At this moment, Lin and the tiger came face to face and the young man grabbed his paws. Cheng was delighted and was surprised that Lin was so strong. Lin was pleased to note that the path to the Martial Art Hall was now definitely open to him. In Shanyang County, the Martial Art Hall is spread over a large area. From a bird's eye view, you can see that its buildings are laid out in the shape of a square. In one of the rooms, the hall master interrogated his daughter. He couldn't believe that Lin had defeated Lu Didiao and his tiger by himself. Miao admiringly replied that it was true and he had never practiced martial arts. Miao marveled at Lin's natural talent and asked his father to accept him as a disciple. Ching Feng replied thoughtfully that despite his obnoxious character, Lu had quite good skills, and expressed doubt that a mere boy could defeat him. He asked his daughter where Lin was now. He wanted to see his skills in person. Miao readily replied that the young man was now in the training room. Lin dreamed that with his immortal sacred body, he should learn a few martial techniques. He sat under the wall of the hall and thought confidently that he could make a great career for himself in this world, if only nothing got in his way. At this moment, the book suddenly vibrated, and a phoenix flew out from there. She knocked Lin down, sat on top of him, and said that she couldn't wait any longer. She asked if it was time to make each other feel good. Lin was surprised and asked the book how Ji managed to get out of it. After all, if a beast maiden breaks out of the book by herself, her strength is reduced by exactly half. The voice replied pitifully, trying to hold the girl as long as he could, but it was partly Lin's own fault, since the greater his power, the stronger the girl's attraction to him, especially since it's just a book, not a safe that can be padlocked. The voice added that the young man should refrain. He didn't have enough strength for the girl yet. Phoenix continued to lash out at Lin and said languorously that she wasn't sure if she could contain herself again. The young man only groaned. The girl asked to thank her for her love, and Lin realized that she wanted to do it right now. He was horrified to think that Qing Miao would be back any minute, and if they were caught together, it would all be over. Lin had to find a way to free himself from Ji immediately. He didn't want to die. At this moment, the Lord of Shanyang County came in and shouted angrily, demanding to be told where the young man who had injured his son was. Lu Taizhu, the formidable city governor of Shanyang City, appeared on the threshold. His guards stood by his side. Jiao and his tiger, both wearing bandages and plasters, were also there. The gawkers were quietly talking about who could defeat Lu Dejiao and who could do it at all. Zhu turned black with anger. The crowd continued to talk softly that it was impossible since Jiao was one of the best in their school. Another voice asked who could have mutilated Lu so badly. He was told that Zhu suspected a person from the Taoist sect. Feng tried to mitigate the conflict at least within the walls of the hall and said that this was a training hall. He asked not to ruin the young man's health too much. Zhu shouted that some youngster dared to beat up his son, so he was finished. He added that anyone who tried to stop him would also be killed. As they approached the training room, they heard shouting. Someone was demanding that they stop undressing him. All three of them were very surprised by these exclamations, especially Qing Miao. After all, the young man was supposed to be training there. In the next moment, Lin and himself flew out of the training room onto the steps. Jiao wailed frantically that it was him, the insolent one who dared to raise his hand at him. His nose was covered with a band-aid. Zhu closed his eyes, asked the young man if his name was Lin Xian, and asked him to keep his pants on. Because it was embarrassing, Jiao kept yelling that it was him, the same guy. Feng tried to prevent the young man from beating him and asked Zhu not to do anything wrong and tried to grab his hand by the wrist. With a quick jerk, Zhu lashed out and screamed, demanding to be left alone. During his maneuver, the pendant flew out of Zhu's hand and flew to the ground, transforming into a 4-star spiritual beast, a leaf mantis. Miao was simply amazed at what she saw. She hadn't thought before that the jade pendant Zhu was carrying could transform into a spirit beast. After leaving the hall, Phoenix appeared on the doorstep. She assessed the situation and told Lin that he could rest for a while. She would deal with the mantis herself. Zhu quickly changed from anger to mercy and was glad that he had come to the right place. He asked if the young man really had his own spirit beast. A murmur was heard in the crowd. One guy didn't believe that the beggar Lin could have his own spirit beast. Others, however, admired Phoenix's beauty. Zhu snapped at the praying mantis and ordered it to attack. The beast was just waiting for it. He immediately pounced on Phoenix, who barely managed to dodge. The mantis only cut through her dress. She shouted angrily at him that he had no right to ruin her clothes and would pay for it. Lin watched the fight cautiously and asked Book what level Ji was at since she couldn't dodge the mantis attacks. The voice replied that Ji Ku was considered one of the top-level beasts, but because she had been sealed for so long, the beast maiden had lost her strength and was no longer as strong as before. However, she is stronger than this mantis, so Lin has nothing to worry about. Indeed, the phoenix was now on the offensive and Mantis was finding it increasingly difficult to dodge her attacks. At some point the girl realized that Mantis had disappeared. He had been called back. Just then, instead of a beast, Zhu himself came upon the girl and tried to grab her. He said that she would now be his beast. Phoenix barely dodged and panicked a little. She knew that Zhu was much stronger than the mantis. Immediately, Lu Zhu flew to the ground. Lin wedged himself between him and Phoenix and punched him. Feng couldn't believe his eyes. He wondered how Lin managed to surpass Lu Zhu and how he had such incredible strength. Phoenix looked at Lin with gratitude. The young man put his arm around Phoenix's shoulders and firmly told everyone present that the girl was his spirit beast and no one would be able to take her away. Ji understood his words in his own way and took them as the emperor's declaration of love. Zhu admitted that he usually doesn't kill weaklings, but after all, Lin has a high-class beast, so let the young man give him the beast, and then Lu will spare him. Lin estimated that he had used about 20% of his energy and had 80% left in reserve. He showed Zhu the famous gesture symbolizing rejection and told him to try to take the phoenix by force. Lin thought that this way he could find out what Zhu was capable of. Miao was seriously scared for Lin and asked Feng to help him. After all, Zhu had a cultivation base at the 3rd level of the Tianyuan celestial realm, and no one but Master Cheng would be able to stop him. Feng asked her to be quiet and said that he was already thinking about it. Master Chen thought about the fact that Lin Xian had already done too many incredible things. He could really stand up to Zhu. Lu Zhu decided not to play much with the boy, but to immediately finish him off in one fell swoop. so he summoned the heavenly thunder fists of destruction. Feng Cheng heard this and turned pale. This was a very formidable weapon. Zhu himself turned into a fiery yellow-colored beast-man and informed the young man that no one could dodge such a blow, and Ling was given the great honor of dying at the hands of the Hail ruler Zhu. Feng shouted, "Was Lu crazy to use such a technique on a child?" He scattered, jumped, and rushed to the young man's aid. Lin watched Zhu rapidly approaching him and realized that he himself would most likely be able to dodge, but Phoenix, who was standing next to him, would be hurt, and that was something he could not allow to happen. He prepared for the maneuver. The frightened Phoenix asked Lin to be more careful. Feng didn't have time to intervene in the fight and only punched the air instead of his opponent. Lin took the blow and flew into the training room. There was a gaping hole in the wall. Lin lay in the debris from the wall. He was covered in abrasions and scratches, but alive. Zhu looked at Lin and said gloatingly that he was strong. They faced each other and the young man managed to force Lu to retreat, but now he wouldn't let him live. Jiao cheered behind his back and asked his father to teach Lin a proper lesson. Phoenix saw the emperor and excitedly ran up to him. Qing Miao ran in through the breach in the wall. She was also greatly worried about the young man. The dust cloud slowly dissipated, and the girls were surprised to see that Lin was alive. There were fresh wounds on his head and arms. Lin yelled that he was in pain and his arm was dislocated. Phoenix immediately jumped for joy on his neck and told him that he had scared the crap out of her. Miao seemed to be getting jealous. She gave him a disapproving look. Master Cheng was astonished. He knew that no mortal could have survived such a powerful blow, and yet the young man was standing on his feet and flirting with the beauty. Lu Zhu's minions froze in silence. His entourage was no longer smiling. Zhu himself was furious. This brat dared to humiliate him. Mr. Lu, the most popular man in Shanyang County. His mouth began to open slowly and twist in a horrible grimace. Curses and threats were going to come out of it. Contrary to the expectations of those present, Lu Zhu suddenly laughed and shouted that Lin represented a true talent and henceforth he could study hard in the Taoist sect. Zhu began to cartwheel to the side and, once he was near Lin, picked him up and dragged him behind him. He said he would pay for the young man's tuition and fees and asked Cheng if he agreed. Master Feng said it was an excellent offer. Jiao ran up and started yelling that Lin had beaten him up and Zhu couldn't let the guy go with impunity. Zhu twisted around and kicked Jiao, shouting to him that it was no big deal, just Lin's fist scratching once. Cheng said he was entrusting the young man into Zhu's hands, asked him to take care of him, and said goodbye. Lu smiled and replied that he would do his best and invited Master Cheng to visit him when he had some free time. Chen Miao asked her father what made Zhu change his mind. As he is known in the neighborhood for his cowardice, Feng replied that Lu was able to achieve the position of city lord through more than brute force, and he realizes that Lin's presence is of great importance to Sanyang City at this stage. Lin was frightened by Phoenix's lustful smile and demanded not to look at him like a wolf at a sheep. Ji took offense and said she hadn't done anything wrong yet. Master Chen and Lin were sitting in Feng's living room, conversing over a cup of tea in a sedate manner. Feng asked the young man to tell him how he came to have a spirit beast. Lin evasively said that it was too complicated a topic and he would refrain from answering. Chen reassured him that they would close the topic at this point, and asked the young man if he knew the real reason why Zhu had suddenly changed his attitude towards him. Lin admitted that he also found this very strange and assumed that he liked Zhu. Feng said that Zhu wasn't friends with anyone but himself. Suddenly he realized he had said it out loud, turned pale, said he was just joking and asked the young man not to take it seriously. Feng began to unfold the map and said that he called the young man over to talk about the 6 counties martial duel. Chen said that there are 6 counties in Kanshan Prefecture, and they all compete with each other for supremacy and glory. The most important event is the martial arts competition of the 6 counties, which is held every 3 years. The master added that the competition would be held next month, but since Sanyang County had the smallest population, it had always ranked last. It was only Lin's appearance that gave them hope of winning this year. Lin now understood why Chen was pushing so hard for him to participate in the tournament and told him so. Feng confirmed his hunch and said that the district would be represented by a 3-man team, and if Lin won the tournament, he would be a resounding success. Pouring tea, Chen said that the whole district would be proud of him. Lin asked to cut to the chase and asked what rewards and benefits he would get if he joined the team. This caught Chen by surprise and he thought that the youth of today were not so easily fooled. The master found a way out of it and said that he would talk to the Lord about it and give an answer tomorrow. Lin was walking down an evening city street, with the book moving through the air beside him. the voice convinced Lin that he should participate anyway, even if he received nothing in return. The young man asked it not to persuade him anymore, he knew Chen just wanted to make him work for them. The voice said that it was a great way to improve his abilities on the battlefield. Lin replied that it was not at all necessary for him to participate, besides, he could slowly increase his cultivation and he wouldn't have to work on reviving the demon race. Book took this as a personal offense. A voice immediately shouted at Lin Yu for pissing him off, and something threw the young man straight into the wall, breaking the wall. Lin began to carefully climb out of there and make excuses that he was just kidding. It was quite difficult to do so. The young man was up to his neck in the wall, there was dust all around. When the cloud of dust dissipated, Lin realized that he was in Qing Miao's bathroom. Everything around him was fragrant with colors. Lin tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding and he got here because of the book that pushed him. He couldn't look at Miao's big thighs in peace and admired her fervor. Chen was furious, she couldn't believe that Lin had turned out to be such an unscrupulous person. The voice, meanwhile, reminded Lin that only he could see the book. The young man realized what a terrible situation he was in and shouted that it was all nonsense. Miao covered herself with a towel and shouted that he had no right to barge in on her. She asked her 4-star beast Xiao Wu to catch that pervert, and Medusa happily threw herself at Lin. She began to quickly attack him with an endless stream of water, which turned into ice on the fly. Lin realized that he was in trouble and began to flee from the freezing cold. But Medusa was faster, and Lin felt himself getting covered in frost. He shouted and asked Ji to find shelter quickly. Taking the emperor by the hand, Phoenix rushed towards the exit at full speed. In the fresh air, Lin shook in chills and thought that if it wasn't for Phoenix, he would have been frozen alive by now. He told Ji that it was too cruel. She languidly replied that she would very much like to warm her master who was freezing. Lin hastily replied that there was no need to bother, he was already warm. Chen Miao appeared on the horizon. She urged Lin not to run away and set the Medusa that was sitting on her arm, who was eagerly spewing torrents of ice. Lin said that there was nothing wrong with him accidentally seeing her naked body. Phoenix turned to Linya and told him that she would arrange everything, if only he wanted to look at the naked beauties. The young man replied that now was not the time to talk about it, and jumped between her and the stream of ice, aiming to slam into Phoenix's back. Immediately he wailed that he was very cold, and Phoenix looked at him warmly. She said it was the second time he'd saved her, and she didn't know how else to repay his kindness except by giving up her body. Miao was already rushing toward him as fast as she could. She hadn't changed her clothes and was also wearing a towel. Chen squealed that she had underestimated him and would correct her mistake now. The girl didn't look under her feet and accidentally flew into a puddle left by her pet Wu. Slipping and losing her balance, the girl immediately she fell on her back. The towel flew off her body, revealing all of her charms to the unsuspecting Lin. The young man instantly tensed up and became inflamed with desire for Miao lying in all her glory. The girl instantly covered herself with a towel and asked Lin in tears if he had seen everything. Smiling, Lin replied that he didn't see anything. In truth, he had trouble seeing. Miao accused him of lying and urged Xiao Wu to attack the enemy together. She let out something that looked like a stream of water. Lin was surprised to realize that Chen had the water attribute, and if she attacked together with the ice octopus, she would kill it. Suddenly there was a shout from the roof, urging everyone to stop. Lin turned his head and saw Master Feng. He asked his daughter if she was trying to destroy the school. Holding the towel with one hand and pointing at Lin with the other, Miao stated that he was a pervert and they couldn't just leave him without punishment. Master Chen assured his daughter that he had seen everything and she need not worry, he would do him justice. But Miao had better go inside and change her clothes. The girl ran away. Chen turned to Lin and sternly asked the young man if he had anything substantive to add. Lin frowned and said there was nothing to it since the master had seen everything. Suddenly it hit him. The young man thought that if Feng saw everything, it could only mean one thing. Master Chen was watching from the roof and had a perfect view of everything that was happening. In turn, this only means that Chen took advantage of the situation and turned it around in his favor. Meeting room, Master Chen proudly announced to everyone present that after a long night of negotiations, Lin Xing had realized his mistake and was ready to represent their district in the competition, which was less than a month away. Qing Miao and Lin said in one voice that he was an old stump. Feng explained that they both had to work hard to improve their skills. Lin said that the master had mentioned a team of 3 and asked who the third person was. Feng smiled and pointed to the side. From there, Lu Dejiao approached, laughing. He said that Lin was just lucky to be alive. but if the young man ended up in his team, he would definitely be finished. Master Chen cooled his ardor and said that Lin Sheng would be the captain this year. The young man excitedly told Lu that it was time to train him well. Dao resented that it was unfair because he had been captain 3 years in a row and promised to tell his father. The master called him over to him and whispered in his ear that he must have forgotten how his father had treated him yesterday. He added that the lord of the city would support him, too. Miao yelled that he had already been captain for 3 years in a row, so he could shut up. If Lu didn't like something, he could get the hell away. Jiao mumbled that he was just asking for clarification. Lin said that he actually didn't care, let him be the captain. Miao pounced on him and told him to shut up too, and if he made a fool of himself in the competition, she would tear him to pieces. Chen left the hall very angry and Jiao asked what Lin had done to her. After all, yesterday she was defending him and today she was ready to tear him to pieces. The young man replied that it was nothing special, it was just that he had accidentally seen her naked in the shower last night, and the girl hated him for it. Jiao wept at these words, though he couldn't explain why he was so moved by the events of that night. Master Chen said that they needed to prepare for the battle, so they should gather herbs at Big Bear Mountain outside the city. He added that they should prepare some pills together, it would rally the team. A short time later, the 3-man team was already at the top of Great Bear Mountain. Jiao told Miao that bears are especially aggressive these days, from what he heard, but Chen shouldn't worry, he will protect her. The girl said she shouldn't do that. Lin walked behind and thought wistfully about the fact that last night his tiger had risen to a 3-star level. Following Miao steadfastly, Lu told Lin that they would go to the right and let him turn left and gather herbs there. Lin said to himself that he couldn't believe his eyes. Lu Dejiao is still sucking up to Chen Miao Miao, what a pity. Lu did not have time to move far away and heard, so he came back and said that he was not a suck-up and Lin would answer for those words later. The voice asked Lin if he wanted to try the Imperial Tonic and explained that now was the time to lay the foundation of his cultivation. He should try to create this tonic here, it's very useful. Lin said he would find all the herbs he needed and rushed off to find them. The voice told him that since Big Bear Mountain was a place of abundant spiritual energy, all kinds of rare herbs, fire cherry, emerald flower, long-lasting herb, dragon bamboo shoots, fruit of eternal beauty, bananas of mastery, heart-cleansing fruit, and even spring fire leaf, could be found here. The voice added that the aura from the fusion of herbs was slowly absorbed into the body. Lin hummed and sat down in the lotus posture, taking in the energy of the herbs. Suddenly, Lin felt that something wrong was happening to him, and he screamed, asking what was going on. The young man said he was very hot and his chest was burning. The voice immediately admitted that he had made a mistake. After all, while Lin absorbs the energy of the herbs, his body continues to absorb the energy of the sky and earth. His body can't hold that much energy for long, it simply wouldn't be able to handle it. Lin shouted that he felt very weak and very pathetic and asked him to do something before he exploded. The voice cried out that there was only one way to remedy the situation. He summoned Ji Ku and released her from the book. Phoenix was just waiting for that. Lin was exhausted from the indescribable heat, he was panting and generally felt terrible. Phoenix crawled over to him and asked that the young man be gentle with her. Suddenly, something grabbed her clothes from behind, and Phoenix flew straight at Lin. She said that she had waited thousands of years for this, and now she would be the first to take the emperor. Beast Girl as Mouse snorted and told her that she would be the first to take him. Phoenix was very surprised that this was a first experience for Lin, and decided to help him. A little time passed, and Ji had it all worked out. Phoenix closed her eyes in bliss, the flowers were fragrant all around her, and she felt good. Soon, she became hot. The phoenix took all of Lin's energy and became stronger. Miao and Lu saw a column of rainbow glow rays coming from the thicket at Lin's side. The girl assumed that Lin had found some exotic herb and said they should go check it out, that light might attract wild animals. Jiao said that in that case, it must be a very strong herb. Lin woke up after a while, he felt rested. Suddenly he realized he was lying completely naked and asked Phoenix where his clothes were. Ji said that his clothes were on her. She covered her body somewhat with Lin's tunic. The young man asked why his clothes were not on. Phoenix rebuked him for his lack of judgment, for he had torn her clothes. Lin thought that he didn't know if this was the first time, even though it was his first time doing this, he didn't have any memories. The voice suggested to continue. He said that Lin and Phoenix were acting too loud and might have attracted someone's attention. Ji said she would be ready soon and started to pack. her whole body was trembling. It was very hard for Phoenix to stand on her feet and she began to fall, unable to keep her balance. The uncomprehending Lin picked up the girl and asked what was wrong with her. Ji asked not to ask too many questions and promised that when she came to her senses, Lin would be in the same situation. She said she would rest for a while, lay down on the ground and petrified. Lin cried out in surprise that Phoenix had turned to stone. The voice urged him not to be surprised, as the contract with the girl was already concluded, and in the future, Lin would be able to summon her with a spirit beast summon, just like Lu Teju had done. This would give the young man an advantage. Lin stirred, he smelled someone intruder. The young man ran to the cliff, intending to jump off. A voice asked him what was the matter. Lin replied that someone was coming. The young man jumped down and hid under the cliff, pressing himself tightly against the ledge. The voice suggested that it was Chen Miao and the others, but Lin said that it was definitely not them. Some man ran up to the cliff and said to himself that it was pretty weird. The stranger thought that the beast sensed his approach and fled as its aura disappeared, but in that case, it must be a very strong beast. The man decided that the aura was too strong and it was definitely not a beast. He told himself that whatever this creature was, it had found the best spiritual herb. The stranger stood for a while, sniffing unhappily. He realized that the bearer of the aura was here somewhere and couldn't have run far away. With a demand to get out immediately, the man rushed toward the nearest bush where he heard a rustle. The stone shattered, and the frightened Miao and Lu jumped out of there. The young man inquired if they knew who he was. He is a future star of Shanyang County. The young man said that they had found the best grass. A frightened Lu clarified what best grass meant. Since they themselves had just come, Miao was indignant and exclaimed that Yang Mao had no right to come to Great Bear Mountain at all, as the mountain lord had forbidden the theft of resources. She couldn't understand where Lin Xian had gone. Lin watched them, looking out from behind the cliff. He realized that Yang was a real thief, allowing himself to come into other people's territory and steal their resources. Mao realized that he was on the verge of death and hastily began to think of a reason for his appearance. He said that he was just looking for something interesting and hadn't noticed that the two of them were also here. But now that he had been caught, Ian had no choice but to silence them forever. With those words, he threw two pendants into the air at once. They immediately transformed into a sturdy 4-star sturdy hedgehog and a 5-star flame sparrow. It was the first time Lin had ever seen both spirit beasts fight at the same time, and he thought enviously that he would have to learn to do so as well. He concluded to himself that he had approached the first training session extremely carelessly, but he would correct himself and do it again. Lu summoned Tiger and shouted that Yang had robbed him and tried to beat him up, and that he hated such scum. Miao urged him to take his opponent seriously, as Yang was a legendary genius who had participated in 3 martial arts competitions, and lashed out at Wu. She ordered Octopus to deal with Fire Sparrow and asked Lu and Tiger to hold on to Hedgehog. Ian watched their preparations and chuckled, thinking it was silly. Immediately, Sparrow soared into the air and began pouring fire on the Hedgehog as if from a flamethrower. Yang's 3 opponents thought differently. Lu just couldn't understand why Sparrow was attacking his own. Miao thought it was strange. Only Lin realized that Sparrow had charged at the Hedgehog for an enhanced attack. At the same time, at another location, a man wearing dark clothes and a black mask reported that Yang Mao was nowhere to be found in the city. The green-clothed girl sitting on the throne was surprised and said that this Yang Mao guy was causing trouble again. Tiger collided with the fiery Hedgehog in battle. As if sensing nothing, the Hedgehog rolled on, pushing Tiger away and knocking him over. Lu grabbed Miao's sleeve in panic, realizing that the Hedgehog was rolling right at them, and Chen lowered her Octopus. A little short of his target, Octopus released the most diffuse stream of ice possible, but immediately he realized that the water reached the Hedgehog and reflected off his hull, freezing him. The Hedgehog now turned into a ball of blazing sunshine and turned all of Octopus' power against him. Miao ran over and picked up Wu. She couldn't believe that Yan had used heat to enhance the Hedgehog's piercing power, and was surprised that the Octopus ice attribute couldn't withstand it. Ian stood nearby and laughed at them. A Fire Sparrow was sitting on his arm. Mao said that it was the most advanced fighting technique and their one-on-one fights had long gone out of fashion. Lu told Chen that he would detain Yang, and let Miao go back and report to the master. He added that the young man would not dare to do anything to him. The girl agreed that it was better to split up. Ian told them that they were both so foolish as to allow themselves the thought of outrunning his phoenix, and Sparrow rushed from his hand toward the fugitives. It swooped past Lu, nearly knocking him over, and the young man squealed that it was very hot. the sparrow flew onward and circled around the fleeing Miao. She scowled. Chen told Lu to get ready to fight. They can fight without spirit beasts. Lu was scared and replied that she was crazy and climbing the fireball with his bare hands was a bad idea. Jiao started yelling that this was the end and they would die if the gods didn't come to their aid. He kept saying it over and over again. And then God came on the scene, at least that's what Lin thought of himself. He jumped out from behind the cliff and shouted to Yen that if he was so smart, why was he competing with them? Lu was pleased with Lin's appearance. Miao was even more pleased that he wasn't dead. She was still head over heels in love with him, and despite his outward austerity, she considered him a true deity for his ability to fight. Lin coldly said that there was nothing more for them to do here, let them run and report the news, and he would handle things here himself. Those two were just waiting for a chance to get away. They were running away at the speed of the wind. Lu fairly shouted that they had gone to get help, and Miao asked Lin not to be a hero. He wouldn't be able to defeat Yang alone anyway and just needed to stall for time. Yen smirked and asked Lin why the young man had been hiding all this time and if he was the one who had gathered the magic herbs that emitted a huge pillar of light. Lin shyly chuckled and said that Miao had obviously exaggerated. He wasn't that big. Ian squealed that he was only pretending and demanded the herbs. He was eager to teach this insolent young man a lesson. He commanded Sparrow to attack the enemy. At the same time, the hedgehog also rushed out of his seat. Lin didn't like it. 2 opponents against 1 was too much, and he knew he would have to work up a sweat. Lin assured Ji Ke that they could handle it too, and smirked, thinking that now they would find out who was stronger. And then Phoenix appeared. She stood up to her full height. She held a firebird in both hands. Ian was very surprised that such a brat had a spirit beast at all. Considering that a disciple of such a low school has a bright spiritual beast, it should simply become Yang's property. Mao took out a special bracelet with a detection crystal. He leisurely tuned it, trying to determine the strength of the beast. The result exceeded his expectations. Ian was surprised to realize that the young man had an 8-star phoenix. Lin was equally surprised and asked the girl when it was that she had managed to become an 8-star. A little shy, Ji said that she had had a good time with him recently. Lin rejoiced at such a quick effect. She had elevated 4 levels from a single time. The sparrow was already flying at the phoenix to attack, and Ian shouted in vain, trying to stop him. Phoenix straightened up and asked Sparrow how such a weak spirit beast like him dared to stand in her way. Is this spittle really called fire? Ji immediately rushed towards the insignificant opponent. Lin didn't have time to say anything. A powerful collision took place. The glow from the powerful explosion could be seen far beyond the Great Bear Mountain. It caught Jiao's attention, and he cried out sadly. Miao also regarded the powerful energy release as a sure sign of Lin's death. Lin reprimanded Phoenix for not controlling her strength, and he didn't know how they could continue training, because the girl would scare everyone in the neighborhood so much. Ian at this time ran through the forest towards the city with the speed of the wind, not waiting for the battle to continue. His clothes were badly burned, and this made Mao as angry as the bitterness of defeat. He was angry with himself, too, because he had struck a nerve. Holding both pendants in his hand, one of which had lost a quarter, Yang swore to himself that he would do everything he could to get rid of Lin before the tournament started. Lin stood on the cliff and said thoughtfully, that guy couldn't defeat him, and ran away. Phoenix immediately ran to him and started making immodest suggestions. Ji had said they were in a secluded place, so she wondered if there was something more interesting to do than look down a cliff. Lin replied that she wasn't interested in anything else. She only eats, sleeps, and thinks about all sorts of vulgarities. The young man apologized and said he couldn't help. Suddenly, they heard the growl of a beast from behind and turned around at the same time. The iron-backed bear, a 4-star spirit beast, slowly approached them and announced its unfriendly intentions. The phoenix was very displeased at being disturbed, instantly constructing a large fireball of fiery pentagonal segments. Ji shouted that the tone was very bad. Bear. She raised the balloon above her head with both hands, swung around and threw it straight at the bear. To Lin's utter surprise, the ball only angered the bear and didn't even scratch it. The young man immediately asked the book how it was possible that there was no trace of the fireball on the bear. The voice told him that bears with iron backs were an attribute of the earth, so only attacks with wood or ice would have a significant effect. Lin said that Ji could roast him, but it would be technically very difficult to do so, and by doing so, he would only waste the phoenix's strength. The voice told him not to worry, for Bear had a weak spot in the lowest part of his back. One blow to the last vertebra in his back could take his life. Dodging the bear's attack, Lin asked incredulously, Was it really that easy? Lu Dejiao had told him that the iron-backed bear was very difficult to defeat. The voice explained to him that the iron-backed bear used to be a patrolling beast of the demon capital, and such a weakness is known only to him alone. Lin rejoiced. This explanation suited him just fine, and he asked Ji to draw the bear's attention to himself. Phoenix immediately summoned a rain of fire, and fireballs flew at the bear, who was chasing after the young man who was running away. The enraged bear began to slowly turn toward the new source of irritation. Now a rain of fireballs began to drum on his muzzle. Lin, who had been watching, performed the maneuver and realized that the very decisive moment had arrived. With all speed, the young man raced after Bear and stuck his fingers below his back. With a howl of pain, he breathed his last breath and died. Lin was amazed that he had dealt with a powerful opponent so easily. A voice told him that knowledge was power. Phoenix jumped into her fist with laughter. Soon their joy at defeating the enemy faded. Dozens of the same bears were coming at them from behind the trees. The voice told Lin Yu that now they would get rich very quickly. They both laughed. Chen Miao flew into the living room and shouted from the doorstep that while Master was sitting and drinking tea, her own team was in great danger. Feng leisurely sipped his tea and informed her that Yang Mo was not exactly an ordinary person. Miao and Lu arrived at the city manager's residence to report. Zhu sat on the throne and told the arrivals that Yang had been promoted to deputy city chief of Huaiwu County 2 months ago. He looked them over and asked if they understood what this meant. Miao explained what she knew. The deputy head of the city is appointed by the head of the government personally. Zhu told them that he was going there now for an interview with the headmaster, but if he went there right now, he and the headmaster would quarrel and Zhu's future would be ruined. Miao was very worried about Lin's fate, and the town leader said that he had already sent his men to scout. He added that they had 3 options for how things would unfold. 1. Lin Xian was defeated and killed before the tournament started. 2. Lin Xian was killed, so Zhu can go to the landlord and ask him for a favor since the landlord can't protect him openly. The third option is the most attractive. If Lin wins, no one will dare to approach their district anymore, so it's in their best interest to win. Jiao told his father that the Lord might not spare them if Lin won. Zhu laughed and replied that he had thought of everything. Zhu said that 3 years ago, the Lord had asked him to prepare 100 iron-backed bears to present them to the emperor as defenders of the city. Lu hinted to his son, in a few years, the Great Bear Mountain had bred almost the right number of bears. He said he would offer them to the Lord and he would reward him. Zhu laughed that they would be in an advantageous position either way. Jiao laughed with him and praised his father's cunning. Miao got angry and exclaimed that she would personally pray for Lin who had saved her life. From across the threshold, a man in a green suit and green eye patch shouted a report, and Zhu cheerfully said that his spies from Big Bear Mountain had returned. The scout quickly approached the town leader and began whispering something in his ear. Zhu portrayed real joy on his face that Lin had won and said that he hadn't doubted him for a minute. Lu asked to catch a bear and send it to the Lord. The spy replied that every single bear on Big Bear Mountain had been caught by Lin, and not a single one was left alive. This news just killed Mayor Zhu. He began to panic, for Lin had broken all his plans. Town manager Zhu lay there and groaned. The gathered luminaries concluded that he was in a state of shock and frustration. In other words, he had a nervous breakdown. Jiao demanded a prescription, but the luminaries said with one voice that heart disease should be treated by a doctor and only a healer could help him. A satisfied Miao dragged Lin by the hand into the room with the town leader. He grimaced and shouted that he felt so good, so why drag him back? Upon seeing Lin, the sick Shu immediately got up from his bed to his full height and shouted that he was very happy. The luminaries were pleased to note that he had been cured. Zhu grew gloomy and asked the young man why he had killed the iron-backed bears he had spent so long cultivating. Lin objected that he didn't know that Zhu was raising these bears, and then no one had said that they couldn't be killed. Chen was surprised that an ordinary person could kill over 100 bears in half a day. Zhu squealed that he wanted to use these bears and gain trust and then become the deputy head, but Lin messed it up. That's not enough to kill him for. Miao stepped forward and blocked Lin with her. She asked Zhu to calm down and reminded him that only Lin Xian could defeat Yang Mao, and only he would be able to win the 6 counties martial competition. Chen added that the Lord would reward Zhu for this. For a while, Zhu was still angry at the young man for the bears, but the girl's words were not without logic. Zhu hummed and hesitated, continuing to drill Lin with an evil squint. He decided to give up and said that the young man's death would be of no consequence. Lin would still fight to the death in the martial arts competition. Jiao was glad to have an extra reason to agree with his father and told the young man that if he didn't win first place in the competition, Lin said he promised to participate, but there was no talk about the first place, and don't let Zhu think that Lin owed him anything, especially since the town manager wanted to beat him up. Jiao reprimanded Lin for allowing too much of himself and being arrogant, and told his father that they would probably have to beat up the insolent man. But as soon as Lin just looked in his direction, Jiao snickered and muttered that he was just kidding. Zhu did not like this and asked the young man how dare he bully his son. Zhu said that since he had defeated Yang Mao, he would defeat the others in this competition. He asked what he needed to do to make Lin Xian give his best. The young man replied that they were adults and there was no need to make a big deal out of it, and asked a counter-question, what Zhu himself was ready to give for his victory in the contest. Without thinking long, Zhu replied that there was a lot of gold. Lin said that money didn't interest him at all. Miao smiled and mentally applauded him. She thought that this guy is really good. Zhu promised him beautiful women, to which Lin replied that he had plenty of girls. Chen was ready to cry, as she saw the young man as her property. The town governor said he didn't want money or girls, and asked what he wanted for himself. Zhu thought to himself that Lin wanted to piss him off. The young man said that he wanted to master the thunder punch technique that Zhu practiced. Last night, Lin had a conversation with Master Shu of the book. He said that his immortal body was full of power, but he needed powerful techniques. Lin asked him to teach him a few techniques. Shu replied that the demon race did have many higher techniques, but he personally didn't have any record of it. The young man realized that the only way to win was to use spontaneity. Shu was silent for a moment and said that there was still one person whose skill would suit the young man. Master said that when Lin fought Lu Teju the other day, he used the snow leopard thunder skill. The young man took note of this. Shu narrated that Zhu used less than 10% of the technique, but it would be perfect for the young man. The only question was how he knew about it. Miao was finally astonished. Even she didn't know what kind of technique Shu was using, so Lin Xian found out about it unknown where and how. Zhu himself was as surprised as the girl. He said that the thunder punch technique was a secret of the Lu family, and even the Jiao didn't know about it. Naturally, Zhu wanted to know how Lin Yu knew about it. Jiao resented his father for not allowing him to practice the family practice since he was his blood son. He asked Zhu why his father allowed Lin to practice. Lin laughed and said that there must be someone to train him. After all, the young man asked how the town governor liked such a suggestion. Lu became angry and shouted that he didn't agree, because the thunder technique was a unique technique that had been passed down in the Du family for thousands of years. There was no way he could give it to a stranger like Lin. The young man jokingly asked Zhu to be a brother to him. Zhu shouted that Lin had lost his mind, and Lu himself was used to being a loser, so he would be at the bottom of the martial arts competition. A scout came running in with another report and reported that in order to raise the aspiration of winning the battle competition of the 6 districts, the following has been ordered to be conveyed: the district chief who wins this year's competition will be promoted to deputy emperor. Something clicked in Zhu's head and he came to the only correct conclusion. Lu told his son that the tournament was less than a month away. Jiao excitedly said that he could not worry and passed the thunder punch technique to him specifically, and Jiao would win the champion. Zhu said that he would be training with Lin the whole time, and added that he was sorry. After all, they could have met much earlier. At that, Zhu called the young man his dear little brother. Jiao looked at the change in his father with surprise. Jiao was offended at the world and was now sitting with his back turned to everyone in the corner. Miao noticed that Jiao was not in a good mood. By the looks of it, Lin told her that he had said those words in haste. He would never have thought that he and Lu Teju could really become friends. Chen jumped up and walked over to Jiao. She told him that it was already time to practice and they had very little time. Lu didn't even want to turn towards them. He was shaking all over and replied that he couldn't bear it all. Lin smiled and said he had an idea. They would call each other different names from now on. He said that he and Jiao were brothers, and the most important thing was to think positively. Lu raised his head slightly and started whining again that he would definitely lose now. They were interrupted from their arguments by someone shouting, "Young people." Lu Teju informed the trio that they should make good use of their time and not waste their youth on idle chatter. As it turned out, Zhu had special training clothes. He suggested that they should all train together. The clothes were so brightly colored that it cut unpleasantly into the eyes. Lin asked Zhu why they would be trained by him instead of the master. Zhu smiled and replied that Chen Feng was too soft-hearted for such training. After all, the reward is doubled. Accordingly, the difficulty of training also increases. Zhu caught the pendant that he had been twirling on his finger like a ball before. Lu said that there was no one in the whole area who could teach the trio as well as him. Zhu immediately shouted that he wouldn't pity them anymore and suddenly threw his pendant on the ground. All three of them were stunned. It was a 9-star spirit beast with the attribute of ice. Lu was pleased with himself. He remembered that he hadn't released it in a long time. After assessing her opponent's strength through the special bracelet, Miao was surprised to notice that this was the first time she was seeing a 9-star beast at all. Lin realized that Zhu had actually treated them mercifully before. Jiao shouted that this was too much and only 6-star beasts had participated in the tournament before. Lu, on the other hand, is going to bully them with a 9-star one. Zhu angrily replied that they were all idiots and this year, the organizers would try to raise the level of the beasts in the competition, and there would be a lot of 9-star beasts, so they wouldn't even be able to win easily. Zhu lowered his ice tiger and ordered it to attack the guys. The tiger made a quick attack with a single leap. They flew off in different directions, unable to withstand the onslaught. Miao managed to jump back in time, but the tiger caught up with the girl on the second attempt. After puffing out his breath, Lin said that the lightning attack was something incredible. The electric discharge was still running through his body. Zhu laughed that his tiger had defeated them all, and they, a pathetic bunch of weaklings, still hoped to win the championship. The team amicably summoned their beasts, with Jiao cowardly placing his tiger at the end. The ice tiger rushed at them, and Miao demanded her octopus to hold him back. The latter released his stream of ice. Tiger Jiao rushed at the electro-tiger, and Chen belatedly remembered that ice conducts electricity. Immediately, Electro-Tiger threw an electric discharge that traveled through the octopus ice stream and hit the girl hard. She screamed in pain. The tiger lunged at his electric kin, was also hit by a strong shock and howled pitifully in pain. Jiao got angry and told him to be a man and stop meowing. The tiger hid behind him out of fear. Phoenix summoned a sea of fire and directed it at the ice tiger. Zhu smiled and asked to pay special attention to the attributes and levels. A fiery spirit beast couldn't burn a high-star beast with the thunder attribute. Lu said that they were idiots and he had only wasted his time training them. At this time, his tiger was already unconscious and flying through the sea of fire. He landed at Zhu's feet, and the coach froze in bewilderment. Lin appeared out of the flames and explained that fire could not defeat him, but fists could. However, if Zhu didn't want to waste any more of his time, he could go. Lin was very eager for knowledge and asked about whether there was a way to combine the efforts of the spirit beast and its master. He added that he almost saw Yang Mao use it, but he was scared off by the phoenix, and Lin would like to see it. Zhu laughed and said that he was a very funny guy, and for his sake, he would break his ancestors' instructions and tell him about the method of merging man and animal. The thunder beast woke up, came up behind him and picked Zhu up, gently hugging him. Immediately, Zhu stood up to his full height beside his beast. The two seemed to share an aura. Miao was amazed that the town leader had such a strong thunderous aura. Lin concluded that the fusion of a person and his spirit beast was down to transferring the attributes of the beast into the owner's body. After checking the number of stars with the bracelet, Lin saw that there were 3 less and asked what was wrong. Zhu explained that spirit beasts have a huge amount of energy and can transfer attributes to their master through communication. During the merging of the human and beast, the level of the human increases. Lin suddenly realized that it worked like a portable battery and the external source was charged by the battery. Tiger gave up his 6 stars and became weaker, while Nozum Zhu became very strong. Zhu explained that there is a downside. After losing too much energy, the beast would go through a period of weakness. If it is attacked, it will die. And the person associated with him would also receive damage. For this reason, it is usually not learned before reaching the heavenly spring realm. Zhu added that Lin could try it, but it was not worth using this method until they were both in a difficult position. Zhu asked to carefully feel the vibrations of the spirit beast's pillars and enter the same frequency as him and let his consciousness enter the beast's body. Miao closed her eyes, focusing her attention on Wu. Jiao also hugged his tiger and tried to find a common aura with him. Looking at them, Lin also suggested that Phoenix try to fuse their energy together. Ji Ku obediently agreed and began to transform right before her eyes. After only a few seconds, the girl reported herself slave-ready and showed herself in a negligee. Upon seeing her, Lin immediately roared that he didn't mean it at all and asked to change immediately. Phoenix looked at him in bewilderment. She was sure he wanted to enter her physically. Zhu, Lu and Miao watched with interest. Lin squealed that he was talking about entering the mind, not the body, and got it all wrong. Phoenix realized her mistake and was embarrassed. Jiao thought that with their antics, they had forever ruined his impression of the word enter. Soon, Master Chen Feng approached them. He said that the first round of the tournament had already been announced and their opponent was Huaiwu County. Lin remarked that this was an interesting coincidence. Chen relayed the words of the manager of Huaiwu County. He said that the team had invaded Huaiwu's territory, and they had a big fight with Yang Mao. Chen added that the governor sought a face-to-face meeting, but the Huaiwu overlord demanded to settle the dispute in the ring, so the overlord scheduled them to fight in the first round. Zhu was mad that they dared to denounce Lin and his team. Jiao said that they had even less shame than him. Miao immediately shouted that it was the opposite. They were the ones who had trespassed the Great Bear Mountain, and yet they dared to denounce and slander them. Lin hesitated and said that now we should think about which one of them to punish. Yang added that they are just muddying the waters and they need to focus on how to win this competition. Lin asked Master Feng if there was any information about the participants. He replied that he didn't know anything yet. Zhu couldn't help but notice that the guy was thinking straight. Lin confusedly said that Yang Mao knew absolutely everything about them, and thus they had lost their advantage. Zhu stepped forward confidently and demanded that the exploration be left to him. He promised to get any information down to the color of their underwear on the day of the competition, and said he would let them know. Lin said that they should work hard to improve their beasts and their own training, and also informed them that he had something interesting for them. With these words, he took out a spatial pouch worth 10 gold from behind his sinus, designed to weigh up to 30 kilograms. The young man spat out a mountain of potion flasks and said that he had made various iron bear potions, so they could help themselves if they needed. Jiao's jaw dropped, overjoyed that they now had so many excellent tonic potions. Miao was also very surprised. Zhu sobbed bitter tears and missed his bears, because he had so dreamed of becoming the deputy emperor. Master Chen calmed him down and assured him that they were not wasted. The team was using the potions to prepare for the tournament. Seeing Lin leaving the site, the master asked him how the training was. The young man assured him that he would be back soon. He had some things to pick up. He walked on the grounds of the Martial Heart Hall and thought about the fact that his team's spirit beasts had not yet reached 6 stars. However, the opponent's beasts would most likely be 6-star beasts. Moreover, there was a high probability that all of the beasts would have 9 stars each, and thus, he would have to rely on Phoenix. After thinking for a bit and realizing what he needed now, Lin took out a bottle and opened it. He figured that if his kidneys held out, the spirit beasts would be able to feed on the energy to the fullest, so he prepared himself and poured the contents of the drink into himself in one gulp. Having accomplished this difficult task, Lin hummed and took out his red pendant. He shrieked, summoned Phoenix, and threw the pendant on the bed. Phoenix didn't have to wait long. She showed up immediately as if she was just waiting for it. The girl was hot and wet. She showed up in a nurse's outfit and innocently asked what the young man would like. Lin exclaimed that she was very hot and added that they should definitely win the 6-county tournament. He hinted that Phoenix would have to climb 3 more levels. Lin undressed and said that someone was having a rough night. He thought they would definitely try something different this time. Just then the book smacked him on the nose with a call to stop, and the young man stopped halfway to Phoenix. Master Shu asked him if Lin wanted to pump the girl up 3 levels in one go, and rebuked the young man that he shouldn't do that, and if he overdid it, it would end badly. Lin shouted back at him that he had spent 2 whole days gathering energy and that was enough. Shu replied that he was referring to Phoenix. Ji asked in surprise what she had to do with it. Master replied that she needed at least 2 months to handle that amount of energy. Otherwise, Phoenix might explode and die. Shu added that it was too much for her, so the young man needed to restrain himself for a couple months. A disgruntled Lin said that he understood and left, muttering on the way that these 2 months would take forever. Phoenix had a life-saving idea, and she asked Shu to unlock the other sister in the book, since it could be deadly for herself. Master Shu admitted that he had a different opinion of her and thought she wouldn't want to share with anyone. Phoenix said she didn't want to, but the emperor's burden was too heavy. With tears in her eyes, Ji declared that she could not let her own selfish interests sideline the revival of the demon race, and told the young man that she had only one request. She asked him not to forget her, even when in the future Lin would be surrounded by many women. The young man said that she was too kind, and he himself wept. Lin and Phoenix sat hugging each other on the bed. Shu said it wasn't a bad idea, but it wouldn't work. Lin asked what was wrong with it, and the master explained that every time he unsealed the beast, the energy expenditure increased. Shu said that with the current supply of poles, the youngster would need at least another 20 days to fully absorb them. Lin resented that 20 days was too long. After all, they had a tournament coming up, and he couldn't afford to waste his energy. Shu suggested waiting a little longer. Phoenix was all but unwilling to back down from her plans and suggested that she still use it herself. Lin asked if the girl was referring to the merging of the spirit beast and human. Shu said that it could work. Phoenix admitted that she was a little embarrassed by the young man's kindness to her, and agreed to try the new method. Lin told Shu that there was no need to rush to discover the second beast yet. Ji explained that in order to participate in the tournament, the strength of the beast was very important, and it's also very important to have the right attribute to fight, as the more attributes, the more control, and on top of that, 2 months was too long. Lin, after a short hesitation, said he would try it and hummed meaningfully. He sat behind Phoenix on the bed and they concentrated on merging their auras into one under Shu's control. Feeling an extraordinary burst of energy, Phoenix decided that she would give all her energy to the Emperor. Lin continued mutually transferring energy as long as he could until his nose was bleeding. Shu rejoiced and said that this was enough and he could unlock a new spirit beast. Full of energy, Lin took the book and began to open it, summoning a new girl. The book glowed, and bright golden rays streamed through the room. Lin was a little surprised to see Ji. He was hoping for a new girl. The girl's leg began to slowly descend from the bed. Just then, Lin realized that it wasn't a phoenix at all. The spirit beast this time was the silver moon ferret Nanai. She said that she was happy to welcome the emperor. On the training ground, Jiao was training Tiger. The latter was breaking wooden poles with a single paw strike. Jiao was already a bit tired and was glad that he at least had a tonic potion. He asked Miao where Lin Xing could be and if he was sleeping while they were practicing. Chen angrily told him not to talk nonsense and assured him that he was somewhere practicing hard. Miao smiled, remembering the young man, and thought that she believed him unconditionally. Phoenix said that she and Na Nai are good friends. She will serve the emperor. E.g. is very happy that Na Nai will serve the young man. Nai went straight on the offensive and suggested that the emperor do it now. Lin asked if it was too fast for a first meeting. However, he admitted that he couldn't take it anymore and these two were so beautiful. Shu nudged him and told him there was no need to be shy and offered to do it immediately. Nai lay in front of the young man and looked at him with bottomless green eyes. He looked at the girl for a long time, as if making up his mind. Suddenly the young man was spooked by something and ran away, dropping all his business and shouting that he couldn't do that. Shu disapprovingly said that Lin wouldn't work out. Phoenix asked in surprise what was wrong with him in the first place. Nai nearly cried that she wasn't good enough and the master didn't even want to touch her. She kept saying it was her fault. Phoenix reassured her that it wasn't and not to think about it. She said she knew why the emperor had escaped. Ji said it's just that the emperor likes surprises and the girl needs to be dressed up. Evening was coming, the sun was setting rapidly. Lin found a secluded spot behind one of the columns in the courtyard and just sat on the ground, exposing his face to the passing rays. Shu asked him what was wrong, and Lin replied that he couldn't do that right away, although he was concerned. The young man said he had to get to know her better, and there was no way he could do that right away. Master Shu said that he was very sorry and did not expect such a principled person. Such a person deserved to be the reincarnation of the demon emperor. He added that Nai is a very vulnerable and withdrawn girl, and Lin made her feel guilty. The young man should go back and explain everything to her. Back at the house, Lin asked if he could summon another beast and explained that he could use the ice attribute. Shu said he couldn't choose which one to summon. Back in the room, Lin called out to Na Nai affectionately. The girl turned around perplexed. She was just busy trying on new clothes. Phoenix grudgingly rebuked him for knocking on the door before entering. Lin artistically covered his eyes with his hands and apologized. He didn't know that Nai was changing clothes after all. Nai said she was very embarrassed. Phoenix asked her not to move. An element of clothing flew off the girl, and she gasped in surprise. Lin opened his finger-closed eyes to see what had happened. Then he'll convince himself that he didn't see anything and his eyes just went black. Phoenix started screaming that he was bleeding. Nai took the blame again. Meanwhile, a mercenary lurked on the roof. Nai was very dangerously close to the young man. His heart began to pound frantically. Phoenix looked sadly at the budding feelings and said that she was happy to serve the emperor with Nai. She thought a lot about her boundless devotion to the emperor. Suddenly, Phoenix shouted that someone was approaching, and Lin along with Nai had to interrupt. The window in the roof began to crumble, and a beam of energy rushed into the room. Ji sent a hemisphere of fire towards her when she saw that the enemy wanted to sneak up on her. She said that the guest might not dream of it. Meeting a powerful stream of flames, the bundle of wind immediately reversed direction. Satisfied with herself, Phoenix immediately concentrated beams of energy in her index fingers. Stretching her arms towards the ceiling, Ji-ko began shooting fire mini-spheres in pursuit. Glad to prove herself, Nigel was immediately there and said she would help her. The guest watched the young man and was pleased to think that he had been caught. The girls squealed, they had missed something after all. An unknown force lifted Lin to the ceiling, piercing through their roof, and the girls only stared helplessly after. As they jumped onto the roof, they saw the visitor standing behind the young man, taking his neck in his grasp. The girls demanded that he be released immediately. The night guest with the mask on his face was clearly mocking the young man. He told him that he was unable to defend himself against even such a weak attack. Lin asked who he was. The visitor said that it did not matter. All that mattered was that the young man had not lived up to his expectations. A 6-star bird flew around in circles. Lin asked why the one had attacked him. He was already panting because of the iron grip on his throat and asked to be released. Phoenix said she would kill him if he did it one more time. The guest asked in surprise where he even came from and why he had 2 spirit beasts. Lin explained that it was a gift from the lord of the city. He told him to behave well and make Shanyang County proud. Taking advantage of the pause in the relationship, the young man asked to loosen his grip. The mercenary contemptuously said that Yang was a complete fool if he was afraid of a lowlife like Lin. The young man immediately asked if Yang had sent him to kill him. The mercenary replied that it was not in his power to command his guest. He had just come to see how far Lin had advanced in cultivation. He added that the young man had disappointed him so much that he would kill him right then and there. Lin told the mercenary that he was one of 3 Wyoming players who would be participating in the competition, and if he is caught injuring an opponent before the tournament begins, Wyoming will be disqualified. The mercenary became angry, and Lin admitted that he could die right now if the man didn't loosen his grip. The intruder finally let him go, accepting his defeat. Phoenix guessed that the emperor was deliberately trying to make a statement. Nai also praised his wisdom. Lin said that he could not deprive them of the tournament, but would advise them to deal with one of Huaiwu County's generals first. The mercenary asked how Lin dared to lie. Only now did the young man see the true appearance and realize that it was a girl. Hearing the suspicious sound, Jiao and Miao had already rushed to the young man's rescue. After hugging the young man, the girl asked to hold him tighter. She said he came here very quickly. Jiao peered up at the roof, catching hold of its edge. He stood in Zhu's arms and looked around. Jiao said it was very strange, a hole in the roof and no one around. Miao assumed that Lin had made a breakthrough again. Miao decided that she should call for someone, and in the meantime, let Jiao go up and look around. The guest and Lin watched the search from the corner of the roof. The girl begged the young man not to do anything. The mercenary asked him not to move and suddenly realized that it was becoming difficult for her to breathe. She knelt in front of the young man and begged him to hide her, as the mercenary should not be seen here. Lin kept wondering where this girl had come from. The blue-haired night visitor froze. Lin didn't know what was going on in her head. She asked him not to move and said her legs were numb. Lin happily pressed himself harder against her and readily said he would not move again. The girl instantly clamped her hand over his mouth and called for silence. Jiao said that he heard some sound, and suggested that Lin had flown away altogether. At this time, a couple of heroes were right below him. The girl told the young man that lust is bad and he shouldn't think about vulgarities. Lin thought about the fact that fate was now entirely up to him and he must hold on. Suddenly something strange began to happen, and the girl felt it. She stared intensely at the same point. Lin asked why there would be thunder rumbling in such weather, seeing the incomprehensible stormy sky. Immediately, though, he thought it didn't matter. He just had to go and tell her everything. A moment later, Lin was already lying on the roof, and the angry girl was running around and getting angry. She blushed all red and indignantly yelled that he had no right to hit on her. Lin started to guffaw that he didn't mean it at all and it was just a normal reaction from any guy. She became even more angry and shouted why he dared to argue with her, intending to call the bird, but Miao called out to him. Lin smiled and said she'd better leave before Miao saw her next to him. The girl flashed high into the air, saying goodbye that they weren't done yet. Feng and Miao walked up to him. Miao asked the young man where he was and what happened. Chuckling, Lin replied that the little thief had tried to kill him, and at the same time asked if there was a girl she knew in Huaiwu County who had a bird with the attribute of wind. Miao's expression immediately changed. and the master exclaimed in surprise that it was Baihe. Lin asked Miao if they knew each other, but the girl nodded toward her father and said he knew better. Master Chen laughed and said he hadn't seen her in years. Miao grimaced an angry grimace, said meanly, and suddenly smashed a piece of wall. Walking out through the breach in the wall, Miao vowed to teach her a lesson she would never forget. When they arrived at the competition, Lin stared at her perplexed, wondering why she had to trash his room. The master asked the young man to prevent his daughter and Baihe from clashing on the field. Lin asked what was even going on. Chen faltered and said that all men have gone left at some point in their youth. Lin thought that he didn't know him from this side and couldn't imagine him having an illegitimate daughter. Master Shu couldn't help but sneer that there was another beauty for the emperor.